Hi, I'm Sarah Novotny, and I'm part of the Azure Office of the CTO, where I focus on open source ecosystem and how our company and projects play in that open source ecosystem. Today, I get to chat with a number of our amazing open source partners, including Red Hat, SUSE, Elastic, HashiCorp, and Cloudera. Those conversations will touch on the latest in joint innovation, paradigm shift from running applications in hybrid environments, and also the benefits of true industry co-development and collaboration. Hello, it's great to have you here, Matt. I'm excited to have us talk about the Red Hat partnership with Microsoft. Do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself, and then I'll ask some questions?
Sure thing, Sarah. So I am Matt Hicks from Red Hat. I run our products and technologies group, so our engineering teams, our product teams, and been a Red Hat sort of forever at this point, about 15 years.
Wow, that gives you a long vision into a long history with the Microsoft partnership. Maybe talk to us a little bit about some joint customer successes that we've had.
Yeah, so I do have a long history going from, I think in the early days when Red Hat and Microsoft competed to really I think it was around 2009 when it's a pretty key moment where we certified Windows Server on Red Hat virtualization and Microsoft certified Red Hat Enterprise Linux on Hyper-V. And that really kicked off a partnership that I think has been super valuable for customers. And obviously we've expanded that a lot. In 2015, we added areas of having RHEL support on Azure and Cloud Forms and work on .NET. But instead of just picking one customer, I would say like the theme is the impressive thing for me. So if I looked at our customer base, I think the overlap, I would guess, is like 95% plus of our customers use Microsoft and Red Hat technologies. And as an example, if you look recently, one of the areas we put a lot of work into is SQL Server alignment on RHEL and with OpenShift. And that has impacted over 1,000 customers just with that work. And so these patterns of being able to partner well, the alignment on open source has been great. The newer areas, like we've worked with Azure Red Hat OpenShift, I'm excited about future opportunities with Arc. They don't impact just one core customer. I mean, it's thousands of customers in any of these areas that we get right. So it's an exciting partnership. I love seeing it just from the Red Hat perspective. It's been great to see Microsoft really embracing open source. And I think it's been really valuable from the customer side as well.
Oh, I always love to hear the external agreement and encouragement that Microsoft is at least doing well and improving in the open source space. So that always is near and dear to my heart. Yeah. So you talked about themes and such around customers and impacting multiple customers. The theme of 2020 seems to be, 2020, all of the crazies that are going on and, the fun that we are being forced into more of a zero trust and digitally transformed world as we work remotely. Have there been any specific engagements that you've worked through or we've worked through together as partners that you can talk about that touch on how COVID or, any of the challenges we've had in 2020 have impacted customers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I get the theme on 2020. I would say
we can be done with that theme. We've learned, we've understood.
That's right. I'm about to be done with this year. We're getting close, so maybe it gets better. But I think from the customer perspective, we see it's quite polarized, where we have customers that are in like the too much camp, where they're getting crazy demand and they're trying to scale. And then we have customers that are in the too little camp, where it's sort of how do they reinvent themselves or evolve just to survive and not lose what they have. And the two common areas across that are, I think both camps really are looking to technology to be able to help move them from struggling with this to hopefully thriving in the environment. And the second thing is there's a premium on agility with this. And this is where I really think cloud native technology is critical. One customer example that we went through fairly recently was a large enterprise, and like many of them, they did commerce in person, and they had a intended shift to moving that all digital. And I think their expectation was it would be about a year or two to execute that plan. COVID happened, in-person commerce fell apart to a large extent, and we worked with that customer to deliver in 7 days what they had planned over a year or two. And I think when we look at the power of Azure cloud native technologies, that's the ability where it feels very empowering to get a customer back on a track where they have options and they can paint their success again in the market. So that was one example that stuck with me through this whole year of pushing our boundaries, seeing what's possible, and really helping customer by customer get back to a good path.
Yeah. And I think that's a great story, because we've seen a lot of people say, here's my 2-year roadmap to digital transformation, and I need it by Tuesday.
Yeah.
And that's, that's something that we've, the most underappreciated and overused word of 2020, in my opinion, is unprecedented, because we keep having unprecedented things stacking on top of other unprecedented things.
Absolutely.
But you also talked about cloud native and getting customers to move that direction and the agility that can come with that, and the container space. And, how do you see Azure, Red Hat, OpenShift, and other tools and work we're doing together helping joint customers in this space, in the cloud native space specifically?
Yeah, I think it's critical. So in Red Hat, we often talk about the need for open hybrid cloud, and customers that might be on premise today, they're not going to be on premise forever. They're going to be utilizing public clouds. They're going to be utilizing Azure. And how do they complete that journey? Do they have to do everything twice? And this is where I see Azure Red Hat OpenShift is it's built on the common core with Red Hat. It's OpenShift in both places. And it allows a customer that might be investing in their data center today to seamlessly move, expand, utilize net new workloads in Azure without having to change the thing that they're invested in. And that it's great product alignment. And I actually think it goes deeper than most people probably realize. We have shared on-site support engineers. We have collaborative security response teams. We have SRE to SRE engagement across the Azure team and the OpenShift SRE team. And so it really is not just a product that's slammed in Azure. Like, there's deep alignment there. And I think that helps customers be able to utilize Azure as a great destination from regardless of where they might be starting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to your point, the seamlessness and making it easy for customers to experience what they have in the existing data centers and then move to the cloud in a comfortable way, still supported by their favored vendors, Red Hat, as well as now being additionally supported by Microsoft and Azure in that space. It's a great blend and a great way to manage that transition for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So was there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we close up? Any big statements? Little statements?
It's funny. I would say for me, I've been involved in open source forever. It feels like 20 plus years. And I've been at Red Hat for a long time, 15 of those. And it really, I think the partnership, the culture change that I've seen in Microsoft, really in that shift to embracing open source, I think it's just been a great thing. I don't know if I could have even imagined that 10 or 15 years ago when I started, and it sure is. It's really nice to be here. It's really nice to be able to genuinely say, like, I'm excited about the future with new areas like Arc, with the capabilities that Azure brings. And it's an exciting path ahead. Hopefully 2021 will be a good start to things there.
Well, it is always exciting to hear that partners are happy about our progress. We have spent a lot of time in the last 10 years working on open source and the culture around open source that is necessary, most specifically moving Microsoft broadly to a learning culture. And I think Satya says a learn-it-all culture, not a know-it-all culture, which is one of my favorite quotes from him. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Matt. It's been great to chat with you. And I hope you get lots of fun out of the day if you get to watch any of the other sessions.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Hi, it's great to see you, Thomas. I'm super excited to be here. Moving on to our next interview with Thomas Degiacomo from SUSE, and I'll let him introduce himself and tell us what he does for SUSE. So, Thomas, tell us a little more.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. So, at SUSE, I'm running engineering and innovation, and I'm very involved with what we are doing and developing for our customers and with the open source communities, because that's where we are doing things as well. I'm very happy to see you, even if it's only virtual. On Teams, at least I'm running Teams on Linux, so I'm in the theme of the summit.
I love hearing that. We want to bring more Microsoft things to Linux as we can have good tooling for our customers, of course, on Linux. So I love talking about the Azure and SUSE partnership. And I know that there was work done and announcements earlier this year at SUSECon about Azure Arc and SUSE. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, as well as the work that's being done to take us into the hybrid space with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very important that we bring new functionalities to our customers in the cloud, but it's also very important that we meet them where they are today, including on-prem. And I remember having worked with Microsoft many years ago on Azure Stack, and I was so much excited about Arc recently in the past few months. And all the new work we've done together with Microsoft and SUSE to provide additional capabilities for our customers to run things on-prem, run things in the cloud, and actually bridge those two worlds together, reduce friction for them to move to clouds for the workloads that make sense, and really enable them to take the best solution and operate at best their IT needs and landscape, including hybrids and bringing those worlds together. So very exciting stuff.
Yeah, there's so much good work between Microsoft and Microsoft Azure and SUSE right now. We'll have lots to talk about. We're also seeing that customers are asking us to help them react more quickly to the changes that are going on. We touched on 2020 being weird, and what is causing your digital transformation? Well, maybe it's a global pandemic, and so we're seeing that question right now. And these journeys, they aren't linear. We're seeing that the customers, are okay where they are and then suddenly need to change. Are there challenges that SUSE customers are seeing? And is there somehow that our partnership is helping them also work through these challenges?
So, 2020 is 2020. So we have triggers to adapt and be resilient and change. But I strongly believe that we actually constantly need to be able to adapt and change to whatever positive or less positive triggers we might face in the world, the connected world of today. So we understand our customers need to constantly be able to deploy and stay ahead of their demands. And if you cannot do that, you're not going to be able to serve your own users and customers. So typically, servers in data centers means that customers are really challenged to deal with all the changes or even to keep up with growth and scale. So we really see cloud as the right way to increase agility. And talking about 2020 specifically, because of these unprecedented times, we also see bursting to cloud a necessity for creating additional capacity fast in hybrid cloud type of setups. And then you might end up with management and monitoring challenges, especially in mixed workloads environments where some of your applications and data might be running on bare metal, in virtual machines, or in a bunch of containers. And so we are willing to help our customers with that complexity as well. And we released recently a SUSE Manager with new deployment and monitoring capabilities to help there. Actually, I need to say as well that SUSE Manager was released on the Azure marketplace this summer. And so from there, it helps improve the user experience on the cloud specifically. Customers can do patch management. They can have very simple installation and tasks that are automated, saving them 90+% of time for onboarding and managing instances in their clouds. That used to be very manual and painful, especially if you run thousands of instances. The other thing that SUSE Manager on Azure brings is saving time on monitoring and observability of large cloud installations. And we're streamlining that by grouping and showing instances in a global federated view that is logical for your business. So that's how we're doing things. We're developing inside open source community-driven projects, and we make that available, easy to deploy and manage, easy to use for the enterprise.
Sounds like you and I should talk about open telemetry as well, because that's a fun project. We'll take that one offline. So it's great to hear all of these fun things that you're working on. And this is a lot of stuff for existing customers or people who have, had put their toe into the cloud waters. I'm going to mix my metaphors there, whatever, put their toe into the cloud waters and have started. What about people who are new to cloud? Is there work that we're working on between Microsoft and SUSE that for people who are maybe concerned about moving to cloud or feel that it might be a big level up for them to move to cloud? Is there work that we've been working together on that relates to that? It's like a leading question. It's a totally leading question.
Well, absolutely. And I understand them that it's not always easy. You're running your IT as it is today, and there's this different world there. You have to bridge to what your current setup is, your current applications and data. And so that's not easy. So there are things we're doing to facilitate that. And one of them is to make sure that whatever they use on-prem can also be used in the cloud so that they don't have to change everything. They can keep the same processes. They can have the same technologies in a way on different side of the world, and that helps them to predict and deploy wherever they need to be, right? So I think facilitating that is very important. And this year together, we have taken even further steps to add automation building blocks as well in the cloud. So once you facilitate the transition, then you also need to bring additional value on the cloud side that they would not be able to get outside of the clouds. And so we've built automation components to SUSE Linux for SAP running on Azure so that customers can deploy at scale and reduce deployment and management headaches they might have had in the past. So the end goal is obviously to reduce the operational debt, improve their ROI, and accelerate time to value with what customers are doing. It's actually very important to me and to both Microsoft and SUSE teams that we bring solutions together because technologies are not living in isolation from each other. So we need to collaborate and we need to put things together in a relevant way. And that's why we've been working, co-developing, co-innovating for many years, making sure that combining our solution is enabling better outcomes, better values for our joint customers compared to having siloed pieces of technologies. And I'm pretty sure you would agree with me. I think it's very similar to what we see in the open source world as well, where it's not about one open source project, it's about putting different projects together, small ones, big ones, one in foundations, one outside foundations, one from one company, one from different companies. That's how you really create solutions and bring value that is relevant for real life use.
Mm-hmm. Meeting customers where they are and making sure that the pieces that they want to compose with are available and useful in the SUSE Linux space, as well as on Azure and in all of the things we collaborate on together.
Absolutely.
This is so fantastic. Let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about what's coming up next, because there's new stuff coming, and I've heard such fun. SUSE's got new moves into the container world. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we are very excited about soon joining forces with Rancher. So you might have seen that we've announced the intent to acquire and actually to combine the Rancher forces and the SUSE forces together. And it's clear today that customers, they have new ways to think about their IT and their software, right? And they need to exploit that. With the acquisition of Rancher, we hope to help customers modernize with containers, container orchestration and management, supporting modern applications wherever they are needed, in the cloud, on-prem, or even at the edge. And very importantly to us as well, all of that needs to coexist. And because you have needs for compute, for data everywhere, and we need to make sure that it works nicely everywhere. Now, when we are considering the acquisition, we saw that the possibilities made available by the innovation coming from several open source projects and communities, and you're no stranger to that yourself, I would say, right? So they are great, but they are still quite complex for customers and people not involved with the community innovation and open source projects on a daily basis to adopt or even to consider what to do, right? The cloud native landscape has hundreds of thousands of projects, right? And so we need to help them with that and offer the building blocks so that someone can put in what they need based on their own considerations, their own status, their own needs. And sometimes we're bringing them opinions on what the different bricks should be, but we need to leave that very open and flexible as well, because that's what the reality is. And you touched on that actually a bit earlier as well. So we want to be wherever you need us to be. We want to give flexibility to take what you need and not force you into fixed environments artificially created for a purpose. So SUSE is not about that. We want to enable the developer and the IT professionals and create options so they don't have to start from scratch and use what they need. And so this is how we will approach the Rancher in our combined portfolio in the future. And actually, Shang Liang and I will be speaking more about Rancher in one of the technical sessions later on.
That's great to hear. I'm looking forward to hearing more about how Rancher and SUSE are going to do things together. What other things are happening in open source? You've brought new stuff to the community in 2020. How is that working? How is it feeling? SUSE's work, Azure?
Yeah, so then I will just have to pick up one or two because everything we're doing is upstream, basically. Yeah. But recently we've done some quite interesting stuff with AI training and modeling of different data sets. Mm-hmm. And our latest developments there are designed to tie mixed environments and make it simple for data scientists to do their job. They should not have to learn Kubeflow, TensorFlow, Kubernetes, even the Azure ML services. So we need to make that simple for the end users. And in that case, the data scientists. So we've released something. It's on GitHub. It can be used actually with the Windows Subserver Linux as well. It can be tested on Azure. And we want to bring that to the edge, to cloud, and the core data center as well, so that you can play and use AI/ML technologies to analyze your data where it lives. It can be Kubernetes, K3s, cloud or on-prem, right? And actually, we have a session as well during the summit with Brent Schroeder, our SUSE CTO, who will be also speaking about that in a little bit more details in a panel discussion.
More things for us to look forward to this afternoon. So modernizing apps is something that we hear can be a pain point. Is there something SUSE is doing specifically to work with customers around modernization of applications?
Yeah, we do. And we do that, again, not only by ourselves, but with partners, because there's a technology component, a platform component, a cultural component, process part as well. And
I love you said culture component. Go on.
Yeah. And I mean, not everybody is going to develop microservices, and not everybody should, right? So, and you need to also take into account where people are coming from and what they're doing, what they need to do as developers. So we're doing that with partners, and including Microsoft as well. And that's a very interesting discussion. And we'll do more with Rancher as well. On the Rancher side, they've been very active in that space, helping companies to do new things with developments. And there are very interesting open source projects that we will be looking at. I mean, SUSE has been involved with Cloud Foundry from the very beginning and making Cloud Foundry different and Kubernetes friendly, actually removing some of the complexity that a big monolithic path was bringing, containerizing just the developer experience and dropping that on any type of Kubernetes cluster. So I think there's something that we have to do in the industry there to facilitate the developer experience. It's still not a given. And I think Microsoft Azure is doing great things. Needless to say, I mean, GitHub, I was coding on Visual Studio 25 years ago and seeing how it developed and where it is today. You're doing great things there, and we can partner along those lines as well. So yeah, very exciting things.
It's always wonderful to hear that our partners think that we're doing well and that there's always more to work on, because both of those are true. We can be doing well and there can always be more to work on together, which is exciting. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And I hope that the sessions this afternoon are enlightening for all of you who are watching this. So thank you, Thomas.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. And we look forward to collaborating even more with you.
Yes, and look forward to more sessions on SUSE and Azure's collaboration later today. Thanks very much, folks. I'm super excited to be back with Armand Dagmar, and he's here with us from HashiCorp. I'm going to give him a moment to introduce himself, but I'm very excited about this conversation. Armand, can you give us a little more info about your role at Hashi?
Sure. Thanks so much, Sarah, for having me. Excited to be here. I think you beat me to it. My name's Armand Dadgar. I'm one of the co-founders of HashiCorp, along with my co-founder, Mitchell Hashimoto. My role has changed quite a bit. I joke it changes every 6 months at HashiCorp. I'm focused as our CTO. We brought in an external CEO about 4 years ago. So I spent a bunch of time with strategic customers, strategic partners, product management in terms of future direction of our products. And spend a lot of time kind of helping educate folks and talk about us, what we do.
Well, someone that invested in customer experiences is going to have lots of great answers for the questions I'm about to ask. So I'm excited. So it's super exciting to have you here and to go through and do this session with you. We know that HashiCorp and Microsoft, longtime partners, we've done lots of work together. We've touched on work with Terraform. We've touched on work with the newest, the console service, and Packer with Azure Image Builder. Like, we have lots of ways that we're doing this. Can you maybe give us a customer example of some of these different things where we've collaborated and how it's actually helped our joint customers?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's almost tragedy of riches. We have so many to choose from here.
We could maybe sneak in a second one if we want to.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a whole host of different ones, and I think different interesting use cases, right? I think some of them are, I'll talk about Adobe for an example, right? Adobe, very much, well-known company, but going through this transition from historically desktop software vendor, you have the Creative Suite, to really realizing a total transformation of we're delivering Adobe Creative Cloud, all of the software becoming much more collaborative, cloud integrated. And I think they're a great example of a customer who, both from their technology is transforming to being kind of cloud first, but from an infrastructure perspective, very much looks like the prototypical sort of large enterprise where existing on-premise footprint, lots of Microsoft technology is there, embracing Azure, right? Embracing sort of, other clouds as well, and sort of a hybrid multi-strategy. So I think, where HashiCorp fits in, and we work great with Microsoft, on-prem and off-prem on the cloud, is really how do we give the customers a consistent way to operate in that sort of a cloud environment, right? From, how do we think about provisioning infrastructure with Terraform? How do we think about consistent ways of security and access control with Vault, to networking and, traffic shifting across those different sites with Console, and then using tools like Packer to build machine images, both on-prem and in the cloud. So I think that's kind of a great example of the type of customers we're collaborating on. I think is, blue chip, going through this sort of transition, complex on-prem and cloud infrastructure, and really looking at all those different layers that, we're collaborating together on.
Yeah. Well, you touched on an interesting thing, because we are both agents of digital transformation. Well, the two companies are both agents of digital transformation for our joint customers. And I think there's a running joke right now. What caused you to make your digital transformation? And it's like, maybe it's an exec VP, or maybe it's a sponsorship from a board member, or maybe it was 2020. Right. Because we all just had to transform. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how the last year and the pandemic has shifted your customer engagements and the work that you're doing with the customers.
It's been such a emotional roller coaster, right? In many ways. We won't get into it, but I think
2020.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the whole year is a write-off, but in many ways. But I think from a kind of a customer perspective, what's been interesting for us is, I think obviously early in the year with, COVID and uncertainty, there was just a moment of like, don't do anything. Who knows what the world's going to look like? And I think as that sort of stabilized and we kind of moved past that, in early, April, I think the biggest thing we've seen is COVID has just been this massive accelerant to the cloud adoption trend, right? All of a sudden you have people who are like, I actually can't send people into my physical data center anymore, right? And like now that's the limit to how quickly I can provision new infrastructure or like handle a failure is like, how can I actually operate versus it's like, actually, should I even be in this business? Shouldn't I just like trust Microsoft, who's going to do this at vastly higher scale and vastly more competently than I will, and move to sort of cloud-based infrastructure? So it's been shocking because even industries like cruise lines, where you'd expect them to be like, okay, they're not buying any software, they're not doing anything, have been coming to us and actually accelerating their journey saying, yeah, we actually need to adopt Terraform because A, we're going to move to cloud, and B, we need to automate everything we're doing. Right. So it's been this sort of interesting thing where it's like, even in places where you sort of would expect things to come to a standstill, it's actually, everything's been revving up. So it's been, my view is the cloud transition was sort of inevitable. People were going to figure out that Microsoft's better at running a data center than they are anyways. But, it's kind of pulled forward that recognition in some sense by, 2 to 3 years for some of these companies and industries we work with, which for us is great, right? I mean, I think we've been, obviously sort of preaching to the choir when you're talking to HashiCorp, about cloud infrastructure. But I think it's just made the conversations that much easier.
Yeah, it's always interesting because those of us who have lived and breathed infrastructure for so many years do see this as inevitable and do see this from that perspective that you gave, which was great, which is I'm not arrogant enough to believe I can hire data center engineering that beats Amazon or Google or Azure. And that's just where we are right now. Well, so I've made that argument.
Well, and I love it's like now you see the level of optimization where it's like Microsoft applying like AI to look at like how power and temperature are being related to like usage and being able to vary the amount of AC in a data center to like maximize the amount of, minimize the power usage and the cost. And you're like, who is going to do that? Who's not like a hyperscale cloud? Like that level of expertise, you're just not going to get there.
Yes. Or you won't be able to retain that talent if you got that expertise because your problems won't be interesting enough. Yeah, it's just fascinating. So like for our last question, this partnership, longstanding, how do you see the partnership as helping enable your customers? How do you see us working together and being able to make your customers that much happier?
It's interesting because I feel like every year feels like just the beginning of our relationship, which is one of these things, it's probably always going to feel that way. I think from the very beginning, the way HashiCorp's always seen our role is we're sort of an enabler of people to actually consume cloud infrastructure, right? Whether that's making it easier to provision things, whether it's easier to secure, whether, making application lifecycle simpler to manage. So we've always kind of thought of ourselves as an enabler, very much focused on what are the user workflows, right? And how do we make those workflows really excellent and then plug it into whatever the platforms and technologies that our customers want, right? And so sort of not surprising that, Microsoft's broad set of platforms, Azure, all of the different Microsoft technologies are things our customers want to be able to integrate with. So I think from very beginning, the partnership has always been this sort of win-win, right? Which is, how do we work to make sure there's first-class integrations for the broad set of Azure's technology, the broad set of Microsoft technology into our tools, and then tell that story together to our joint users and joint customers. And I think the better together is like, great, you're trying to use Azure as your cloud platform. You're using Terraform as the mechanism that you specify and manage infrastructure. How do we make that super first class? Or, with Packer, how can there be a first class image building service that, is managed for you and hosted for you? Or make sure Vault has deep integration with all the Azure, Active Directory and ADFS type systems. So, I think it's always been this better together story. And I think as the Azure portfolio grows and as the HashiCorp portfolio grows, last week we just announced 2 new products. And I think immediately the conversation was like, great, we should talk about integration with all of the different things Azure has and, Microsoft Teams and et cetera. So I think it's always going to feel like this sort of evergreen relationship of like, yeah, we're just at day one of like, there's so much to do and so much to integrate. But, I think it's just an obvious win-win for our joint users.
Well, and you touched on a really great point, because the Microsoft mission is, of course, to empower people and customers to do more. And by working with our ecosystem of partners, we have that many more ways to empower our customers and our joint customers specifically to do more.
And this has been, I was going to say, attitude shows, right? Like, I think Microsoft's been a great partner, and it's, it's been an awesome partnership so far, and looking forward to many more years of it.
Yeah, we are always trying to learn, so it's good to have feedback, and I'm pleased, especially since we're on camera, that it was good. So thank you. And it was great to chat with you, Armand. I would love to continue this conversation, and we're trying to keep them all just to 10 minutes. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to learning more about all these different partner integrations.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Sarah.
Hi, I have with me here today Steve Mazak, the field CTO from Elastic. And of course, Elastic is one of our great partners here at Microsoft. So I'm very excited about this conversation. Steve, can you give us a bit of an intro to yourself? And then we'll move on to the meaty topics of how we work together.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm super excited to be here. So I'm the field CTO at Elastic. I've been with the company for about 7 years. I started out building out the sales engineering team, and then eventually took the role of field CTO. And I help our customers understand how to adopt our solutions and modernize their approaches to security, observability, and enterprise search. And I've been in the open source space for a number of years, having previously worked at Pivotal and SpringSource. And then prior to that, I was an architect and developer.
Oh, you totally hit on a topic that is near and dear to my heart with open source. So I'll just say that for a moment. Open source is awesome.
Yeah, I built my career.
Oh yes, I built mine on it as well. That's fantastic. But we've been having a partnership between Microsoft and Elastic for a couple of years now. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works, what we've developed together, and how this actually meets your customers' needs, and more broadly our enterprise needs as we have potential customers together?
Yeah, for sure. So we started a number of years ago, like you mentioned, working together, and goes all the way back to our having a .NET client for Elasticsearch. We built an ARM template on Azure. And there were a number of other engineering engagements we worked on together. And you fast forward to today, we have over 1,000 customers on Azure using Elastic Cloud. And we have over 20 integrations with Azure ecosystem services and Microsoft services like 365. And so we continue to engage in that relationship and work hard together to make sure that our customers are successful. We even do joint marketing and sales events. So it's great to see customers adopting our solutions on Azure, and working together, we make it really easy and kind of seamless for them.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts about working for Microsoft is this engagement with the open source community and making sure that we're giving back to it with companies that are active in open source, and then also being able to help them with their product vision here on Azure. So all sorts of exciting stuff that we've been doing together. And the solutions that we've been building, they're all starting in the cloud, moving to the cloud, and engaging with customers who are active in the cloud. Is there some more ways that we could see using Elasticsearch? Obviously, it's a great enterprise search solution product, and it helps toward the application lifecycle, working to make sure that you've got the full end-to-end lifecycle of all this work. Is there more that we need to know about this?
Yeah, so you hit on the enterprise search one. Like, we power search boxes all the way from Wikipedia to Instacart, and that experience is supposed to be fast, scalable, and relevant. And so as a consumer of those experiences, you don't really care how big a product catalog is, right? You just want to find what you're looking for as fast as possible. And that keeps you engaged. And so that's really what we focus on. And we brought that experience to observability and security. So just like with a search use case where you're trying to find something quickly, why couldn't you have that same experience with your operations data, your infrastructure data? And so, we bring speed, scale, and relevance to the observability domain. So now you can look at your logs, your telemetry, your application performance management data, even your uptime data, all in a single backend powered by Elasticsearch. And then we have a visualization tool in Kibana that allows you to explore that data and, find all the interesting insights that you're looking for. And then we also started offering years ago a security solution. So just like we did with observability, we're bringing multiple different domains together in security, and the open source community and our customers are using us for threat hunting and endpoint protection and things like that. And the great news is, whether they're running on-prem with hypervisors or they're running in Azure Cloud, we support both. So you have this idea of, data gravity. You might want to bring your data into Azure for some applications and then host it on hypervisor, Hyper-V or whatever, locally. But you want to see all that data in one place. And so that's what we really provide. And then there's a whole long tail of use cases that people use Elasticsearch for. And the great news is a lot of people probably use those today without even knowing it. So for example, when you look for a driver on the Uber app, that's an application powered by Elasticsearch. When you're looking for food, like, I used to do, and you probably likely used to do when we were traveling still, you might use Yelp to find something to eat. And that experience is powered by Elasticsearch. And the list goes on from fraud detection within some of the bigger banks in the world to, taking data in from the Mars rover, for example. So as far as I know, we're one of the few intergalactic or interplanetary software companies as well.
Oh, that's a great soundbite.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question, because we should totally talk offline about open telemetry and how that might fit with observability and Elastic, but we'll take that offline.
Okay.
So how have you seen a shift in this last year as, of course, the whole world is going through, just upheaval with the pandemic? Has your customer use case, or has the way that you've engaged with customers or what they're actually transforming changed in the last year?
Yeah, it's changed in some interesting and maybe unexpected ways. Like, first of all, I think it's fairly obvious to people that, all of a sudden you have to shop online. And, my wife and I never really shopped for groceries online until the pandemic hit, and now we've embraced it. So it's very nice to be able to go to the supermarket, open your, trunk, and they put the groceries in and say, see you later. It's really powerful to be able to do that. And that forced a lot of companies to modernize their marketplaces very, very rapidly. And you can't really do that without cloud, right? You need to be able to bring a new application to market as quickly as possible. And because we power a lot of these search experiences and power the observation of those search experiences, it's kind of a 1-2 punch for a lot of customers. So that's a big shift that we've seen. And some of our existing customers like Instacart, they only got more popular as the pandemic went on. And so I think for a lot of people, that's a fairly obvious use case for us. But some of the more interesting stuff is like, what happens when all of a sudden all these folks start working from home? Now all of a sudden people used to be behind the firewall in the office, and now they're going off site and they're working from home. So you have a lot of different concerns you have to manage very, very quickly. I'll give you a good example. One of the ones that we talked about in our recent conference was a legal firm in Australia that had a bunch of employees start working from home instantly, and they're not used to working from home, and they have all these enterprise IT systems that they have to access. And, it's a law firm, so they work on different cases together, and those cases change. So all of a sudden the CISO has to deal with this whole new paradigm shift of people accessing from different locations and trying to understand what's valid and what's a threat. And they're using our tools to help them make those decisions.
To analyze and engage with the data they're getting back as they move towards zero trust then?
Exactly right.
Oh, fantastic. And that's a great use case, because as every enterprise or every business is at a different space in how they work with things. And not everyone has moved toward the model that a lot more of the technology companies have embraced in the last several years of zero trust, but may still believe or work with the hardened on the outside and kind of soft and squishy and tasty on the inside model.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned that one of my favorite parts of working at Microsoft is that we're taking these open source partnerships super seriously, and we're trying to make sure that we're giving back not only to the project communities, but also to the ecosystems that are around these projects, including the vendors who support and maintain these projects long term. So I would love to know how you have found Microsoft and working with our ecosystem helpful to you, helpful to your customers, and how you see this whole partnership going. And remember, we're on camera, so don't say anything bad.
I won't, I promise. So, I grew up in the Northwest, so I've always been close to Microsoft in Portland, Oregon. So I've worked with Microsoft over the years, even prior to joining Elastic. And I have seen the shift from outside to a more open source approach, which I really appreciate. And, I've been brought into Microsoft to do meetups around the use of Elasticsearch. I went there with a couple other companies that were invited in to speak. And so that kind of collaboration has continued. And now that we're a bigger team, we can support Microsoft in a much bigger way on a more consistent basis. So I think that's great for both of us. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going to market with Microsoft to help our customers, our joint customers, have this kind of best practice experience with us, so that we can basically short circuit all the mistakes that other customers have made. We know how to integrate with ecosystem services. We know how to monitor things, and that really takes the thinking out of it for a customer and allows them just to move very, very quickly. So we're investing in more integrations. So as Microsoft brings new products to market that are available in Azure, we plan to support all of those, so that if you need to monitor them, you have a hopefully one-click solution to do that. And it goes all the way to things like integrated billing. How do we make the billing experience easier for people when they're running on Azure and consuming Elastic Cloud? So we have more work that we're doing there to make that easier for customers. And there's a number of other things that we'll be talking about in the coming months about how we're working more closely together, but I want to save those for the marketing folks, because they're going to be some nice announcements.
Ending on a teaser. Well done. That was great. Thank you so much for your time today. It's really exciting to be part of these endeavors and these engagements, and also just bringing the open source community back out to and open source products and projects out to our customers, as well as supporting the world and the ecosystem that is built around them. So thanks very much for your time today, Steve. It's been great chatting.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm always happy to help Microsoft. I appreciate the time.
And we're always happy to help open source. Thanks. Well, I'm excited to be back today with Arun Murthy from Cloudera. And I want to go ahead and have him introduce himself for a moment, and then we'll get into some interesting questions. Arun?
Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. Hey, everyone. My name is Arun Murthy. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Cloudera. I'm responsible for sort of all of the engineering, all of the support, work that we do, both in the open source communities and our cloud products. My history sort of began in the data space about 15 years ago. I've been working in Hadoop, which is the open source project, since 2006, and really glad to be here.
Well, that's super exciting. We're happy to have you here as well. There's been a long collaboration between Cloudera and Microsoft, and that's been super cool and has built lots of offerings. I'm super curious about an example customer journey that we've worked on to try and help a Cloudera Azure joint customer make the digital transformation and transition to cloud. Do you have an example like that you can share?
Oh, absolutely. We've got tons of those.
Great.
The collaboration between Cloudera and Microsoft began a long time ago. I originally was part of the Hortonworks side of the equation, where we work with Microsoft to stand up HT Insight, which is the Hadoop offering there. And we've been very fortunate to work with Microsoft for a long time. So collaboration is not only just as two companies, but also in the open source communities. And with
always my favorite moment, open source.
And with the world we're in today, with customers trying to figure out of this digital transformation that's been accelerated by the pandemic, we've got tons of great examples of how customers are leveraging our two companies for not just public cloud, hybrid cloud, but also at the edge. We've got a great example of a customer who's got a lot of infrastructure in Azure, who works with Cloudera both on-prem, but also has a lot of our technology running on the edge. And the way this works is they take a lot of that data, this is an energy customer, and that sort of real-time data they have, they stream it over to Azure, over 130,000 devices, and then we actually do the analytics using Cloudera software in Azure. So it's a great example. We've got another customer, a large global car manufacturer who's spread all over the world. Again, they're doing everything from autonomous to sort of supply chain management using software and infrastructure jointly provided by Cloudera and Microsoft Azure. It's been a great collaboration. We're very appreciative of it.
Oh, that's always awesome to hear. You touched on the concept of the pandemic and how that's actually accelerating a lot of the conversations with customers. We know that customers are running lots of data-heavy workloads here on-prem, and have you seen that acceleration continue to move toward the data aspects of these relationships or these customers?
Absolutely. And fundamentally, what the pandemic has done is done a couple of things from my perspective, right? One is it's accelerated their need and their skills and their ability to take advantage of infrastructure everywhere. If you're all sitting at home, you're probably not excited about going into a data center to actually build out new things or fix your data center at this point, right? So what's happening is customers are like, hey, we've got all this data, but we also want these burst to cloud capabilities. We have these net new use cases, particularly on the edge. And if we're not building our new infrastructure for it, we want to leverage the data we have. We want to leverage the new data that's arriving. I kind of joke that more data is getting generated outside the data center than inside at this point, right? So in that world, I've had the benefit of 15 years looking through the space right now, and we're seeing customers generate that data, access the data, and analyze that data. And the other transformation I see is increasingly this pandemic is forcing the line of business to actually think creatively and out of the box. And that is creating an opportunity for us jointly to actually provide sort of easy to use, easy to operate, actually something that the customer doesn't have to operate, services in the public cloud, because now they can truly focus on what they have to do, which is to add value to the business, versus figuring out how to worry about infrastructure and data centers and so on. So a great example of that. And what is also driving, like I said, is this heavy need for sort of this hybrid aspect of it, which means now that you have data in multiple places, multiple geographies, sometimes even multiple clouds, they need a consistent way to sort of look at all this data, all the workloads, have a consistent sort of security and a governance mechanism, and especially the regulatory and the compliance frameworks that we have to, sort of acquiesce to today, forces them to have a consistent layer of security and governance across the hybrid spectrum, which is, again, something that with Microsoft we've been focusing on at Cloudera. We call it SDX, the shared data experience. So that's something that we work very closely with both Microsoft and the open source communities.
Oh, and you keep mentioning open source, which always makes me happy because, of course, we live on the shoulders of giants. And to your point about making sure to add differentiated value within the business, it's an important moment to sit there and say, let's use tools that have already been written, already been vetted, services that exist to make sure that where you are doing your novel engineering efforts is supporting the business directly, as opposed to rebuilding something that people have already built. Such important points.
No, I just to add on to this.
Please.
Really near and dear to my heart. I've been involved in open source communities for nearly 2 decades now. I've done some work in Linux. I've done some work in PHP, the language, if kids remember this. And of course,
I remember it.
Of course, I've had the pleasure to work with Rasmus for a long time, the founder of PHP, and then I've obviously been really fortunate to be involved in the Hadoop ecosystem, the open source communities for a decade and a half. So it's very near and dear to my heart.
And it's one thing that we're spending a lot of effort here at Microsoft to make sure that we're working to engage both with the open source communities and also then
20 years. Who would have imagined this 20 years ago?
Yes. Yeah. We have come a long way in 20 years. And I love this fact that we're also reaching out to the companies that are part of these open source ecosystems and trying to build products and projects with them to meet our joint customer needs. Mm-hmm. So on that note, this is the moment when you get to kind of give us a scorecard, but we are on camera. So, be kind. How has the partnership been between Cloudera and Microsoft? We've done it for many years. What are your thoughts on it at this point?
Yeah, great question. And, we couldn't be happy about the partnership. As we've talked for a long time now, we've been involved. Both Hotmux and Cloudera, the two companies came together with Microsoft. But even now, it's not just the open source communities. If you take the cutting edge technologies right now, we spend phenomenal amount of time actually working with several service groups at Microsoft. A really good example is we've taken all of the open source engines, Hive and Spark and Impala and so on, Flink and so on. We made them natively work with Kubernetes. So with CDP, which is a new platform, we provide sort of native cloud services. Most of them are actually running on Kubernetes, right? So when you go to the public cloud, we obviously want to use the best of breed in the public cloud. So we actually leverage Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS, very extensively on Azure. Similarly, we use other cloud native Kubernetes services out there. But that's a really good example of the work we've been doing. So for example, even literally in the last couple of weeks, we've been giving feedback to the AKS team, Brandon and those folks. And, for example, the one feature we're just about to enable as a joint collaboration is we work with AKS to actually make sure a Kubernetes cluster in AKS can go down to literally 0. So our idea is that if you're not running SQL queries, if you're not running on machine learning applications, we want to quiet the cluster down completely and actually spend no resources on behalf of the customer, right? Which obviously makes sense from a cost standpoint. So that's a great example we went in, we opened GitHub tickets, had conversations with the management team, and took them a few weeks out, and they add the feature. Now we come back and we're taking advantage, and this is as of last, I would say, less than a week or so ago. So it's a great example of us collaborating with Microsoft on cutting edge technologies like Kubernetes and AKS, and long way to continue.
and delivering awesome customer things that customers need in order to make sure that customer value, that's the word I was looking for, in order to make sure that we're doing this together.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on today in either our collaboration, your customers, what you're seeing with the pandemic, anything further?
No, really, I think we covered quite a lot. Again, really appreciate the partnership. And, I want to use this opportunity to kind of continue to spread the message open source. Come on, I would love to have more of you involved. Love to see Microsoft. Would love to see customers be part of this because, together as vendors and customers, I think we're going to a more of a partnership rather than a vendor-supply relationship. And that's great to see with the context of open source.
Yeah, and we keep coming back to customers, which is awesome. So customers, ask for what you need from your vendors and from the people that you're working with and from the upstream projects. And we will all make our best effort to get all of those things in and available to you to make your best experience possible. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today, Arun. It's been great to hear about the Cloudera and Microsoft partnership, and I look forward to the things that we have ahead for us.
Great. Thanks, Sarah and Microsoft, for having us.
Great. Thanks for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great day.